Until they bring the streetcars back, chapter 42. I was sweating in a leather chair in Mr. Brown's office. He was the county attorney and a pretty big wheel. He looked like Jimmy Stewart, but with more gut, and I would have guessed he was a farmer or something. The place was piled with all kinds of books and tablets and paper like he'd been going to school since the Civil War. Basically, I felt good about him, like he wanted to get Letterman as much as I did, but it seemed I'd been answering questions for a month. He sprawled behind a big desk and asked me lots of stuff, like he kept forgetting what I just told him. A short, chubby woman perched on the edge of the chair scribbled notes, and a sweet-smelling pipe tobacco filled the place. And that's the last you saw of the baby, the guy said. Yeah, under Letterman's arm. He still had the knife. Did the streetcar motorman see him? No, I don't think so. Did the motorman see you on the cowcatcher? Yeah, when I got off and ran. When you talked to Sergeant Riley on the phone, did you tell him you would bring him a dead baby? I thought for a minute, watching the stenographer's pencil dancing across the notebook. No, I didn't dare say baby. I said body. I'd bring him a body. I could tell that disappointed him, and he kept kind of gritting his teeth when he wasn't talking. Can you think of anything more? Well, one night I watched Gretchen's bedroom. I watched lots of nights, but one night I saw Gretchen was naked and Mr. Letterman was in the room with her. What were they doing? I couldn't see. Why were you looking in her bedroom window? She wanted me to. She wanted me to see something so I could tell the police. She said that they wouldn't believe her. And did you see something? No, I never could see anything. He picked up his pipe and shuffled around the jumble in his office and looked plenty worried. He stopped and stared out one of the tall windows like the lady and I weren't there. Then he came over and sat in his chair next to me. He held his hand up to the young secretary like he didn't want her to write anymore. Cal, he said, looking at me real serious like, Gretchen told us her sad and terrible story, and something inside me believes her. I was hoping her mother would cooperate Gretchen's story, but she didn't. Like her husband, she claims Gretchen is a sick girl and that she made it all up. My instincts tell me that the mother isn't telling the truth, and I can't go to trial with only my instincts. Your testimony becomes crucial. If you want to help Gretchen, you have to tell me everything you can about your involvement with her. If you go on the stand, they'll do everything they can to discredit your testimony. Okay, I said, and I knew right then I was a goner. Mr. Brown's hair was kind of mussed, and he put both hands on his knees and leaned towards me. I'll ask you the kind of questions you'll have to answer on the stand, all right? All right, I said, and my Adam's apple was trying to get out. Why are you here? I don't know what you mean. Why are you here? Why are you involved with Gretchen Letterman? What business is this of yours? Geez, it was like he'd switched sides, and now I was sweating BBs. She asked me to help her, and I knew what her father was doing to her. Are you involved with Gretchen romantically? Am I what? Are you two sweethearts? No. Cripes. What a lousy question. You haven't kissed her or touched her? No. I have a girlfriend, I shot back, and then I thought, at least I had one. Why did you steal 2 cases of liquor back in April? I didn't answer right off. I looked at my hands in my lap and felt the sweat trickling from my armpits. It was all coming unraveled. I was just being trapped, and this time I'd be sent to jail for years. Leaning closer to me, Mr. Brown smiled slightly. You're not on trial here, Cal, but I have to know. Will I go to jail? No, I have a great deal of weight with the court. If you help us get this man, I'll get any further charges against you dropped. What do you say? I looked into the guy's big friendly eyes, and I don't know why, but I figured I could trust him. I stole it to frame Letterman. And the car? Yeah, I smashed it into the drugstore. The guy looked like he had just lost his job or something, and he stared at me like he didn't know if he should scold me or congratulate me. You stole Letterman's car, filled it with stolen liquor, and deliberately rammed it into Lacter's drugstore? Yeah, could you find out how much it costs to fix? Why, he said as he scratched his head. I'm going to pay for the damages little by little, maybe $5 or $10 a week. I have a good job. Geez, the room got quiet as Whaleman's study hall, and the lady and I just sat there, and I was holding my breath. Mr. Brown shook his head from side to side like he couldn't believe it, and then he got out of the chair. The wood floor creaked, and he walked to the window and just stood there. I was getting more and more scared, and I wished he'd say something. Darn, Letterman had fooled me. He wasn't a rat after all. He was a porcupine. I want to get this man, Cal, Brown said, while he kept looking out over the city below. I want you to know that, and trust me, I want to put him away for as long as possible. Brown started walking around again, muttering to himself like we weren't in the room. He stopped in his tracks near the door and turned to me. I appreciate your willingness to help Gretchen. I'll need to know everything you did and anyone you talked to about her. Can you stay for a while and help us get this all down? Okay, I guess so. Brown turned to the wall and let out a big sigh, just standing there for a minute with his head in his hands. Then he smacked his hands together and spun around and looked at me and the chubby woman. I may be going back to private practice after this, but we'll go for murder in the first degree. I wasn't sure what that meant, but it sounded really serious for Letterman, and I felt good, and I liked this guy, and it was like I had someone in on it with me for the first time. Steve picked me up first on the way to the powwow, and he went stag too, and I knew he did it so I wouldn't feel left out. After we'd picked up the rest of the bunch, we headed out Rice Street for Sucker Lake. Everything seemed normal. They played and sang and ate like I'd never been in jail or kicked out of school. Only the ache in my chest kept me from feeling like one of them. Tom and Lola were there, but I avoided them as much as possible. Would you like to go to the junior senior prom with me, Cal? Jean said when she handed me a hot dog. It wasn't until then I knew what I'd do. Thanks for asking me, but I'm going with Gretchen. It would be nice if Gretchen knew anything about it. I was no longer eligible to go, but Gretchen was, and she could darn well invite anyone she wanted. I couldn't wait until tomorrow to talk to her. My mother acted confused when I steered her into a back pew Sunday morning. We were breaking tradition, but it felt like everybody was staring at me, and sitting in our usual spot with my father not there would only make it a lot worse. The three of us had taken the streetcar, but I didn't stand up front and talk to Andy Johnson. The guy tried to smile when we got on, but he couldn't keep the sadness out of his eyes. During the service, I had all I could do to keep from bawling, and I couldn't find anywhere to hide my face. We stood with the congregation at the right time and held the hymn book at the right page, but neither Peggy nor my mother nor I could sing 2 words. Every hymn reminded me of my father, and I had to keep looking over next to my mother to make sure he wasn't there. After church, I called Gretchen and met her on the Summit Boulevard that afternoon. She balked. Thanks, Cal, but I don't feel much like it. It'll be good for you. Get your mind off your father and the trial. There had been nothing in the news about Letterman since his arrest, and she was afraid that they'd try him for just was stabbing the cop. The closer it gets, the more scared I am, she said. Then the dances is exactly what you need to have some fun. When she said she'd have nothing to wear, I told her I'd get some money out of my savings for a new dress. She only agreed if I promised she could pay me back when she got a job in the summer. I don't know how to dance, she said, like she was excited and petrified just thinking about going. Neither do I, and I've been going to dances for years. That settled it. She had a week to shop and get ready for the junior senior prom, her first social outing ever. I don't know why, but when I went in up onto the porch and rang the bell, I was really nervous. Mrs. Wallace let me in. She was the lady taking care of Gretchen and her sisters for a while, and she asked me a bunch of questions about the dance and how late we'd be out. Basically, she was really nice about everything. Mr. Wallace was a balding guy, and he just smiled and listened. Then Gretchen showed up in the light pink formal, and I thought my glasses were lying to me. Geez, no one in the universe would believe that that was Gretch the Wretch. Her two little sisters stood around watching kind of bug-eyed and didn't let out a peep. Everyone was nice and all, but I was relieved to get out of there, figuring they'd heard all about me. At the car, Steve and Sandy treated Gretchen like she'd been doing this with us all the time, and off we went. It was kind of screwy and sad when you thought about it because I knew Sandy wanted to be out with Scott and Steve wanted to be out with Katie and I wanted to be out with Lola, and here we all were going with someone else, and I just hoped that Gretchen would have a good time. I could tell that she felt strange and out of place when we walked into the ballroom of the St. Paul Hotel, but so did I. For never having danced, she had little trouble moving her feet in step with me since I only did the slow dances anyway. Most of the kids looked like they had no idea who I was with, and I'd catch them staring. We drank 7 Up and watched the other couples, and when Steve gallantly asked Gretchen to dance, she hesitated and looked at me for a sign, like she didn't know if she was supposed to or not. I nodded and smiled, and Steve escorted her to the dance floor like Errol Flynn or something. I had to laugh. I can't believe that's Gretchen Letterman, Sandy said. I know, I said. I can't believe it either. Sandy watched Scott and Katie dancing lovey-dovey. I'm really sorry about Lola, Cal. I know how you must feel. Yeah, well, I'm sorry about you and Scott. I could see she was about to cry, and I wish I hadn't said anything. When Gretchen and Sandy were off to the Biffy, Steve said, "Are you in love with Gretchen or anything?" I watched the dancing couples. No, I said, and I thought about loving Lola like was like having polo. You end up with a limp. Do you think it'd be all right if I asked her out? Steve said with a sappy grin on his face. Yeah, sure, but be awful nice to her. After the dance, we hit the Hasty Tasty on the other side of Minneapolis, and Gretchen ate 2 cheeseburgers, besides fries and a chocolate shake. Steve dropped her off first, and I walked her to the door. Thanks, Cal. I never thought I'd go to a dance. I had fun. You can do lots of things now, I said in the shadows of the porch. Maybe, she said, and I could tell she was still plenty scared. Steve dropped me next, and when they drove away, I don't know why, but I started bawling like crazy. Just like that. Geez, tears came gushing out of my eyes, and I tried to muffle the sounds as I walked around to the back, afraid I'd wake up the whole neighborhood. If I had to guess, I'd have figured it was losing my dad that was making me cry, but maybe it was Lola. I couldn't be sure anymore. I didn't know if it was a sign of growing up or proof that I was Norwegian, but somewhere deep inside the dread had seeped in and had a stranglehold on my heart. I hated crying.